This is much, much more than a medical scandal. Children aren't suffering a medical issue. They're suffering a indoctrination issue.
The narrative that transgenderism has always existed. When I know, because I was raised in my culture, and you don't even have to be raised in an Indigenous culture, it's just not true.
If the question, what is a woman, for the average girl today is answered by Pornhub, then you might very well want to cast off the female identity in exchange for something else.
We're not uterus havers, bleeders, breeders, and these terrible terms that we have been told that we're bigoted if we do not answer to.
Welcome back to The Bridgehead. My name is Jonathon van Maren. Welcome to the show. So today we're going to have a fascinating panel discussion on a couple of subjects that people hear a lot about but don't know a lot about. And that is the connection between transgenderism and transhumanism. Now, transgenderism is a subject I've been reporting on for years, and in that capacity, I've gotten to interview a lot of people with a lot of experience in this area. One of the people I got to interview earlier this year for the European Conservative magazine is Jennifer Bilek. She is an investigative journalist who has tracked the funding of the gender industry for over a decade. She follows the money. She is author of The 11th Hour, a platform which highlights the connections between technology, transsexualism, and transhumanism. Her research into the backers of the gender industry has been utilized in legal briefs and platformed in myriad publications, films, and other media in the U.S. internationally. She has been published in First Things, Tablet, Human Events, The Federalist, The American Mind, and in an anthology called Female Erasure. She's an essential voice in understanding how the transgender movement, or as she refers to it, the transgender industry, hijacked our culture. Another guest that we have is Dr. Suzanne Vierling. She is a clinical psychologist and a higher ed professional with a vision to preserve the institution of womanhood in the fourth industrial economy. Those who are wondering what the fourth industrial economy is, we'll be discussing that on this panel discussion extensively. And then we have Michelle Uriarau, a co-founder of the Women's Action Group in Australia. She is dedicated to advocating for women's rights, improving child safeguarding, and as a tribal woman, preserving her culture against the potential distortion and dehumanization brought about by the advancements of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Again, if you haven't heard that phrase before, you should definitely listen to this discussion because we talk a lot about the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the implication for the culture that we live in and the lives all of us lead. Here is that discussion with three extraordinary advocates on some of the most pressing issues of our time.
All right, from the top.
I'll just check.
Jennifer, let's start with you. You've been doing the shoe leather journalism of following the money in your pursuit for truth about the transgender industry. You were the one who turned me on to the term transgender industry when I accidentally used the word transgender movement in an interview with you. You've actually corrected my language on a lot of different aspects of the transgender discussion. Some of that journalism was detailed in your recent book, which is coming out very soon, Transsexual, Transgender, Transhumanism, Dispatches from the 11th Hour. It's not only the 11th hour in the metaphorical sense, but also that's the title of your blog for those who want to check it out. What have you found in your reporting that other commentators on this issue are missing?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us all on today. I think this is brilliant that we're all coming together because we each talk about this issue in our own sphere, but we don't really usually come together to talk about it. And I think that's really important. So I'm looking forward to this. Now, I've been researching this industry for probably a decade. And I wrote my first major expose in 2018 for the Federalist. And what I found was a lot of wealthy men were funding the dissemination of gender ideology through all of our institutions, military, cultural, medical, educational, religious, so that they would take on this ideology, and also through the LGBT political infrastructure. And the LGBT is now an industry. It has a marketing constituency worth $4.3 trillion. And they use that as a cudgel to get other people to adopt gender ideology. That's a lot of capital to negotiate with. And so I started to make the connections to the medical tech industry. And I also brought in a millionaire who is actually the author of the first gender bill, a transsexual transhumanist, Martin Rothblatt. And he's a widely renowned entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur. He's been invested in the pharmaceutical industry, xenotransplantation, 3D organ printing corporation, pharmaceutical industry. He's the co-founder of Sirius Satellite XM Radio. So satellite surveillance, AI. He made a robot of his wife. The Human Genome Project at the UN level. So he has all these broad accomplishments. And so he's not really funding, his funding for this ideology, to disseminate this ideology, is very scant from what I can tell. Whereas the others are pouring billions into this. But he's very, very pivotal because this is his ideology that's being disseminated. He believes that transgenderism is an on-ramp to transhumanism, and he thinks that separating people by sexes is tantamount to South African apartheid. He thinks that we can be liberated by just obliterating the sexes. And his transhumanist, I would call, cult is really about, he also has a religion, Terrasim religion, which is a technological religion. He believes that we're building God with technology and that we will reproduce the species with technology eventually, which is where all this gender industry stuff is leading us. So people didn't really pick up on him, even though I wrote about him and have been writing about him for a decade now. And he's all throughout my book. And they more or less focused on the medical industry. And because these surgeries and the drugs that go with them are very, very profitable when you're doing it to many, many people. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm hoping that we're on the verge of changing the conversation now, because this is much, much more than a medical scandal. Children aren't suffering a medical issue, they're suffering an indoctrination issue.
So just as an establishing question, if I could get you to define one more term before I move on. So you talk about a transsexual transhumanism. Now, I know what a transsexual is. I think I know what a transhumanist is. What's a transsexual transhumanist?
Okay, well, it's the escalation of the male fetish of owning womanhood, taken to the point where men can now own women through medical technology, specifically reproductive technologies. Where this is leading, or so they hope, is towards reproduction sans women, which is why we're being erased in language and law. And children are being taught that they can transcend their sex through medical tech. And they're learning this in grade schools. And they're also learning about surrogacy and reproductive technologies in grade schools, that they can be born through technology. So this is where all this is leading. This is the transhumanist part. I mean, if we're not a sexually dimorphic species, who are we? And what are we? Are we still human?
Right.
And then we go on from there.
So that actually dovetails neatly into the first question I wanted to ask you, Michelle. You've written about the connections between synthetic sex identities and transhumanism as well. You've talked about the fourth industrial revolution and exponential advancements in disruptive technologies, one of the hottest topics in technology right now. How did you get interested in this line of research, and what connections do you think we should be paying attention to that others are missing?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, thank you so much for having me on today, Jonathan. So as a Māori woman, I'm Ngāti Kahungunu, Ngāti Mahu, Ngāti Hinipare. That just means the tribes that I'm from. I've been concerned for some time now about the narrative that transgenderism has always existed. Pre-colonization for Indigenous cultures, etc. When I know, because I was raised in my culture, you don't even have to be raised in Indigenous culture. It's just not true. It's a lie. So starting from that point, Jonathan, there was a curiosity, and there still is a curious response from our leaders, I guess you could say our decision makers, when we talk about our concerns as tribal women about, so-called transgenderism. And like I said, there's nothing remotely anything like it in our culture, but this idea that it's always existed in our culture, that's just not true. We tell these decision makers, our children, we never ever consider our children to be born in the wrong bodies. To us, that would be tapu or taboo. All this narrative that is developing, and that these decision makers they either dismiss what we say, they call us names, they minimize what we're saying, our concerns, and so it's like, why are they doing this? Why would these people who would never take the word of a cross-dressing man, suddenly they're interested in what these cross-dressing men got to say about our cultures, which these cross-dressing men have got nothing to do with, by the way, could I just say. So that's the point at where I started. And then I stumbled across the incredible work of Jennifer Bilek, and first and foremost the article that she just spoke about, and these men that are at the top of this entire industry, because it is an industry, and their influence and their power, not just in America, but in other Western countries as well, like New Zealand and Australia. So that's basically, that's, I guess, an overview of where I come at it from, Jonathan. And I would say the connections that we should be paying attention to would be the connections that our leaders of our countries have with the World Economic Forum, in a nutshell.
If I can ask you a follow-up on that, because what you're describing sounds to me like you have some incredibly wealthy people, the people being exposed by Jennifer in her work, wearing your culture like a skin suit to promote something very sinister and informing you about things that are not true, and thus kind of exercising this weird form of, what would be a good way to put it, sort of like ideological neocolonialism almost.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually call it our second colonisation. And so I'm a co-founder of Wāhine Kōrero alongside Diane Landy. And we actually always refer to this industry as our second colonisation. And one of the things, just quickly I'll touch on, that colonisers do, whenever they colonise a people or a country, is that they rip out the language. Okay, so that's one of the things we talk about too in Wāhine Kōrero, and that Jennifer really does well, and same with Suzanne, reminding us, that no, there's no such thing as a trans woman, and there isn't anything, and especially in our culture. There's nothing in our histories, nothing in our songs, nothing in our mythologies, nothing at all in our carvings, nothing that indicates that we even entertain the idea that men could be women. Or that men could give birth. The very suggestion, again, is taboo to us, because women, to us, are the creators of life, because we are the birth givers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, it's going to be difficult for me to say disciplined here, because there's so much in all of your work that I kind of want to talk on all these threads. But first, I want to get to Suzanne, so we can kind of lay down all of our establishing credentials here. Suzanne, you've written extensively on the origins of quote unquote gender neutral language and its connection to the commodification of women's bodies and the erasure of women at all. Now, many believe, and we are told constantly, that gender neutrality is mere courtesy. What do you see?
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for having me. I wanted to make sure that I said that. And, there is no such thing as gender neutrality. Everything that's happening now, and I'm going to reiterate colonization inside of this new fourth industrial revolution that we're under. This is our fourth. We've had the first, second, third, fourth. And in each shift of our economy inside Western culture, women are left behind and kind of have to catch up or kind of get caught in the machinations of the change. It's not like we have nice, neat, clean meetings and say, hi, everybody, we're changing into a new economy. It kind of trickles down and people have to grasp and kind of catch up. Gender neutral language is colonization of women's language, women's spaces, women's identity. We have an identity. We're not non-men. We're not vulva havers. We're not uterus havers, bleeders, breeders, and these terrible terms that we have been told that we're bigoted if we do not answer to. Anybody that forces you to change your language is a colonizer. And I really mean that. And you see women all over the world, in particular through Europe, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, United States, Mexico. We're shocked. We're saying, what? And in print, this language that we did not vote for, we did not ask for, we did not approve, and we loudly dissent. And then we're told we're bigots for dissenting to a new language that's being imposed on us. Not only is it our language that's being colonized, but our spaces. When you tell a group of people, i.e. the tribe of women, when you tell them, you will take these people in your spaces. You will not say anything. You will be nude and in front of men. You will obey. That's a form of, we have linguistic imperialism, colonization, and the eradication of our spaces and eradication of our voice to dissent. So there's no such thing as gender neutrality. It's a mocking way of letting women know in this new economy, we have a new spot for you, a new position for you. You are going to be chopped up in little pieces because we have a new purpose for you in this new economy.
So a follow-up question, because I noticed some of the things that you highlight in your work. I read some of your work. Jennifer sent it to me, and it was really fascinating because just like when I read Jennifer's work for the first time, you touch on things that I had seen but didn't identify as a part of a broader narrative. And the value, I think, of all of the work that you all have been doing is that you're creating a narrative that takes on boards different aspects of the transgender debate, such as we've seen it, but paints a different and far more sinister, frankly, picture than most people have identified. And on the issue of women being told exactly, this is the new language. Like I've seen this in online debates where you essentially have big brawny men in dresses who aren't fooling anyone, like telling women to sit down and shut up, telling them that they're more female than they are, claiming to have experienced things that are biologically impossible for them to have experienced. But this is what I wanted to get to. In the language, you said we're not vulva havers. Like men aren't being asked to relabel themselves as penis havers.
Right.
And
right.
It seems to me that in the shifts of language, despite the fact that transgenderism as such should ostensibly cover, both of the sexes,
right.
all of the linguistic changes seem to be oriented in one direction. How do you explain that?
Well, I look at gender ideology and the gender industrial complex as part of a larger movement. Again, we are in a massive economic shift. And what we're experiencing are opportunistic capitalism, where people are seeing the blood in the water. They're seeing that we're changing, that men are being silenced from protecting women. I believe that. And women are being forced into answering to this new thing. So I look at the gender industrial complex as a part of a larger picture where you have the commodification of the woman, period, outside of gender ideology. Gender ideology is telling you, get in your place, girl. Get in your place. That's a psychological breakdown, the breaking down of the new slaves, so to speak. I have to break you. so that you answer to a new name. So you have talk, it's very, don't mess around, California, talk of brothel, red light district, talk of legalizing prostitution. It's coming down the road. You have the woman's body, the reproductive material of the woman used in biotech, biopharma, and life sciences. You have commercial surrogacy. Sounds so nice, commercial surrogacy, but we're talking about the manufacturing and selling of babies, the use of the woman's egg, the use of the woman's milk duct, every part of the woman's body used, again, biotech, biopharma, life sciences, the womb for surrogacy, the poverty industrial complex, which I think gender ideology is going to be subsumed under, where poverty is a business, race is now a business, it's now the race industrial complex, a part of the poverty industrial complex. So we have these new lines of capitalism, these new veins that allow for profit taking. I worked in foster care. I saw how profitable foster care was and is. And you see what happens when the child becomes a commodity. You see what happens to a poor woman, and all of the different systems, including higher education, where programs are created. In terms of the gender industrial issue, Jen, I forgot to tell you about this. Now we're seeing academic programs come up where you can get your degree in social work with an emphasis in gender affirming care, because that's coming down the pipeline. You have nice threads, veins, businesses that come up as a result of a complex or a system. So gender industrial complex, poverty industrial complex, the child welfare industrial complex, human trafficking industrial complex, multiple business crop off of this. And who's at the center is the woman, the mother, her womb, her poverty status, how she's perceived. I just want to add that I was really concerned. I followed Andrew Yang, I follow Kai-Fu Lee, I follow a lot of men. And when I hear you talk about the woman, when you talk about sex work, which there's no such thing, okay, it's not work. Okay, sex work, UBI, and the fourth industrial revolution at the same time. That's chilling. Mm-hmm. Women should pay attention to that, and men should pay attention to that. If you're having that kind of conversation together, that's very frightening. While we're being renamed, rehomed, told where we can go, and told what we can and cannot have in our spaces, that combination lets you know a change is afoot. Houston, we have a problem.
Michelle,
I answered your question.
Yes, very much so. We just lost Michelle for a minute. I think she's going to come back on. Okay, Suzanne, you mentioned the fourth industrial revolution. For our listeners and viewers who might not be totally familiar with the fourth industrial revolution, when you use that phrase, what are you referring to?
Well, I'm referring to a new economy that we are in and moving deeper into, where there is a move towards a merger between the human and the machine. That's a very broad statement, but technology is moving along where that's coming. And there are some good things. There's some good things, and there's also some not so good things, as long as if we pay attention and stay human, everything could be good. Another thing about the fourth industrial revolution is an abdication of human ingenuity and work with hands, and moving towards artificial intelligence, and we've all heard about it, AI, robotics, and continued outsourcing, relying on cheap labor around the world. And outsourcing has really, in my opinion, harmed us. And so it will be additive. We're moving towards robotics and artificial intelligence and other technology that takes away from human ingenuity, human work. Our entire psychology and economic system is reliant on human work. And so the fourth industrial revolution is moving away from that and into a brave new world. And I'll stop there. I'm sure I'll think of something else while Michelle is talking.
Okay, Michelle.
So just what Suzanne said, when she said moving, that's really true, and that we don't really even know that there's no stopping of it as yet. I don't think we've seen the full capacity of this fourth industrial revolution. For me, just as an overview, it really is about classism. It's about, would you believe, never dying for the elite class. Immortality is what they, some of them will say, no, it's not about immortality. It is. It really is. They're all trying to find ways in which to extend their lives. And again, that's the elite class. As far as, the rest of us are concerned, they're not really, it's without our reach. It's outside of our reach, that's for sure, in terms of costs. That's, but I think also too, it's about control. It's about control of humanity, and not just how we organise and relate to each other, but how we even think, what we speak. So it's controlling our reality. Well, they promote it as a reality. It's not a reality. Just like medicalising children, and there's no medical. They don't need to be castrated. It's a lie. So for me, that's what the fourth, at the minute, that's what the fourth industrial revolution, the definition of it means for me anyway.
So we're going to get into the realities of what's taking place in this fourth industrial revolution. But Michelle, I wanted to do one follow-up question, because something that struck me, coming from Canada, where we recently had a massive debate on a conversion therapy ban bill. And this was protested by, again, some people that you wouldn't expect. It wasn't just social conservatives who were opposed to it. There were plenty of other people who were opposed to it, because interestingly about Canada's conversion therapy bill is there was an explicit exemption for converting a boy into a girl or a girl into a boy. So we're really being sort of gaslit with this language. But I want to read a quote of something you wrote, and then I'd love to just know what you meant by this, because I think especially when it comes to conversion therapy bills, they're very popular across the Western world right now, and people don't know how to discuss them because they use terminology that people instinctively respond to, like, oh, conversion therapy, like we're against that. This is like using electroshock on people with same-sex attraction. This is terrible. But here's what you wrote. When New Zealand passed its so-called Conversion Practices Coercion Bill in February 2022, they in fact legalized the dissociation and dismemberment of children's bodies, and with it their evolutionary capacity. When they passed the Self-ID Amendment in December 2021, they legalized identity fraud. In essence, what both of these bills have done has kickstarted a shift, as Suzanne also referred to, from a human-centered society to the idea that a non-human-centered society is possible in law. I have never read that critique put so succinctly and so well. What did you mean by this?
So what I meant was, I guess, if we take, Klaus Schwab's word, it is that what we're seeing is the disruptiveness, or the disruptive aspect of the fourth industrial revolution, mobilizing and within our laws is what's happening. So when it comes to sex self-ID, actually with both bills, here in Australia, we've had them, in the state that I live in anyway. I'm in Victoria. Sex self-ID passed in 2019, which means that anyone can actually just go to the Births, Deaths and Marriages Registrar, take a mate with them that they claim to have known for 2 years, claim that they've lived as a certain identity, whatever identity. There's no proof needed. They don't need to have any medical, and I'm not saying that they should, but they don't need to have any psychological therapy. They don't have to have anything at all other than just their claim that they lived as whatever so-called identity that they're claiming that they want to have recorded on their birth certificate. And then in the conversion therapy bill that passed, I think it was like 2 years afterwards here in this state at least, so the sex self-ID bill, actually you can also change your so-called gender or sex on your birth certificate once every 12 months. Oh. So, so you can, I mean, that's, I guess, their so-called fluidity with their industry, but then when you look at the conversion therapy bill, it's affirmation only. It's fixed. And you have to affirm children. It's specifically for children. It's not for adults. It's actually aimed at making sure that everyone around children, any child who claims to be the opposite sex or no sex or whatever, actually affirms that child. So we've got these conflicting policy or legislation, and we've got it in law, enacting in law. So with the, now I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what question you actually asked me, Jonathan. Sorry.
How these two bills kickstarted a shift from a human-centered society to a yes.
Thank you. So it's, you can't be both. You can't be affirmed as a identity, so-called identity, while also being able to change it once every 12 months. And this is where it's undoing the ribbon, our tether to reality, to our humanity. That's how I saw it anyway.
So of all the many topics I wanted to get to, I wanted to start with one for everybody, and I'd love everybody to respond to this, if you will, because one of my main research areas has been the impact of digital pornography on the generation of so-called digital natives, which is people growing up with the internet surrounded by the slowly rising fourth industrial revolution. I'm 35, which means that I just missed it. The first iPhone was released in 2007, the year after I graduated high school. But everybody younger than me is exposed to digital pornography around the age of 9. I've spoken to pornography and the threat of pornography to probably 3,500 students in the past year. Being both exposed to and addicted to pornography by puberty is common, if not increasingly normative. And this is a factor that very few people are willing to talk about, because when I first started to see this massive shift of young girls who wanted to identify as boys, and then even more interestingly, the girls who wanted to identify as non-binary, this actually made a lot of sense to me, because if you look at what's the standard fare on the front page of Pornhub, the most popular content for pretty much any major porn site, we've got studies from the US, the UK, and Canada all indicating that the most popular content is degrading, it's violent, it's reducing women to sex objects. Much of it isn't even sexual anymore. It's just sexualized violence, like choking and hitting. So this doesn't even reach the level of sexual violence. It's just people being aroused by the physical destruction of the feminine on screen. And a generation of people are wiring their libidos to this, right? The Atlantic magazine reported that 24% of young American women reported being spontaneously choked during intimacy. 24%. This is a wild statistic, but it is not uncommon. It tracks with what I'm hearing all the time. And that's why I thought when Matt Walsh's documentary, What is a Woman, came out, I thought to myself, okay, that's a very clever argument that actually gets to the heart of what all of you have said so far. But if the question, what is a woman, for the average girl today is being answered by Pornhub, then you might very well want to cast off the female identity in exchange for something else. Because if the answer to what is a woman is what they're seeing on Pornhub or on Xhamster or one of these sites, and that's where the non-binary thing comes in. If they're not even saying they're male, they're just not female. Like, we are opting out of this identity that makes us a sexual target. And so I started doing research on this. And when I first published an essay on this at the European Conservative magazine, where I also interviewed Jennifer as part of the same series, the responses that I got over the next 2 weeks, it was nonstop from mothers, especially of trans-identifying girls, saying they stumbled across porn. It wasn't pornography that made them non-binary or transgender. It was pornography that made them not want to be girls anymore. And so there's been a lot of research on sort of how transgenderism is a weird fetish for males, autogenophilia, and I've read things I wish I could forget. And so there's that whole thing where guys through looking at pornography essentially become obsessed with being the objects of sexual desire. But there's been little attention paid to the other side of the coin, which is, in my view, and based on my conversations and research, is a lot of girls are identifying as not female because they don't want to be the object of sexual desire, because of what they're seeing on the internet. And so maybe I ended with you, Michelle. Do you want to start again? What kind of observations or insights do you have into that? Have you seen the same connection?
Yeah, for sure. Even in speaking to detransitioners or desisters, they'll often refer to how some of them have actually experienced sexual trauma in their lives. They've been raped, sexually assaulted. And because of their experiences, it was the impetus for them not wanting to acknowledge their, them being female or, being a woman. They immediately saw the benefits of being a man. So, and then that then plays into this narrative that children are being indoctrinated with at school, where, oh yeah, you can choose whatever sex you want to be, or whatever, they say gender, but they mean sex.
Mm-hmm.
You can be whatever you want to be. And so, and we're also seeing this too, in emergency, in hospitals where young girls are fronting up with terrible injuries through having, I think it's rape, but anyway, through having sex, so-called sex. Being choked is not a loving act. And when you're making love with your partner, that is not loving. Being raped from behind, these injuries that girls are, fronting up to the emergency department with, unprecedented, and in relation to the past, like they haven't seen these injuries before, is what I'm hearing. But also too, as a mother of a teenage girl, I'm a homeschooling mum. We homeschool for a reason. This is very much part of the reason why we've chosen to homeschool. It's really it's prevalent to the point where these girls don't even realise that they are being sold this image of them, that they have to be sexually attractive at the age of 13 or 14, Of course, my daughter's not like that, only because, I certainly don't teach her any of that kind of thing. And it doesn't even have to be taught as much either, Jonathan. It's just, when you're a teenager, you follow the trend. That's what you do. We've all done it. And unfortunately, at the minute, the trend is, you can be whatever you want to be. Pornography is, you can get a, what is it? One of those, you can get a, or hold a, not a YouTube, what is it? Those, a lot of American, yes, OnlyFans, that's it, sorry. You can have an OnlyFans account, you can make all this money, you can be popular, and, it really is, unfortunately, it seems to be quite the selling point for our youth, and it's heartbreaking to witness, to be honest with you.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you say that it's sort of culturally driven as well, because what really struck me, we've already talked a lot about language, and we'll talk a lot about language further in this conversation. But I remember when a column came out by Ross Douthat of the New York Times, where he said, if you look at the polling data, the good news is that everybody used to say that pornography was going to cause a massive spike in rape and sexual assault. We've actually seen rape rates go down. And I said, well, that's because we've defined what sexual assault actually is. Because when I grew up, I was taught by my parents that it's wrong to hit a girl. Now, based on the cultural milieu, based on 50 Shades of Grey, it's okay to hit a girl as long as it turns you on. That strikes me as more creepy, not less. But now, as long as you sexualize the violence you're perpetrating against the female body, somehow this is something that's not only okay, but it's considered to be normal, and you're vanilla if you object to this. Jennifer, you've written about this a lot as well. What have you observed with the connections between the pornography industry and the transgender medical complex?
Well, first of all, these two industries have come up together, feeding each other. The first man in America who appropriated synthetic facsimiles of women's biology, went off to some other country to get his surgery, came back and was celebrated as a woman. Was within a year, it was in the 1950s, and it was within a year of the first publication of Playboy magazine. So Playboy magazine was brought into the home and promoted as a positive thing for, sophisticated men, right? And so and the more technology grew around this, the more it became available. And the more it became available, the more people became desensitized to it, men. And the more desensitized they became to it, the more pornography had to be exacerbated, the more violence had to come in, the more degrading and humiliating it had to become to arouse them. So this has escalated now over the course of 2 generations. So you have 2 generations of men that have been fed the idea that they are entitled to women's bodies, to objectify them for sexual gratification, as you said, tying it to their, to be more crude, to their orgasms. That's a monstrosity. And transsexualism has really grown along with this. The plastics have become better for men to appropriate facsimiles of women's biology. It's become more and more normalized within the culture. And basically, the porn that was the 1950s porn is now mild, like behind the doors porn was mild by anything that's happening on a music stage today, like Megan Thee Stallion, or some of these women that get on the music stage and they're just barely clothed and they're just writhing around and doing all these sexual antics, right? So the more that you bring the fringe out into the center, then the more destructive and crazy and bizarre the fringe has to become. But we don't have any boundaries. So this is what's happening. And I don't know if that's actually an arrangement, if that's an agenda, or if it was just a development with the advancement of technologies. But I do know that now it's happening. Children are being overly sexualized in schools, on their social media, in libraries. They're being exposed to very strong sexual material. And this is in accordance with the idea that we are moving towards, as Suzanne said, the melding of, the fourth industrial revolution, where the human is going to be melded with data, technology, and biopharma. We're going to be changed through this. So in order to adapt to these technologies, if you're going to meld humans with machines, then you have to dissociate them from their humanity, from their embodiment. And the best way to do that is to sexually traumatize them. And children are not the only ones that are being sexually traumatized. We're all being sexually traumatized because you can't get away from it. It's all over the culture, the sexual objectification of women. So that's how that really basically ties into the whole gender industry. Getting children. I mean, the whole ideology behind gender, the whole ideology of gender at this stage is dissociation. Dissociation is the name of the game. We want people to dissociate from their sexed reality, because sexed reality, reproductive reality, will be taken over by the tech sector. This is the idea. This is the impetus behind this. And so then what are we? What are we, and what do we do with, we're not a sexually dimorphic species anymore because we're making babies in a dish, right? We're growing gametes, small and large gametes from skin cells in a laboratory. So we don't really need to have reproductive sex anymore. So sex just becomes not a bonding experience, not intimacy, but a smorgasbord of just physical acts. So children are also being taught this. They're being taught like all these different sexual acts that are groovy and fun, right?
Well, yeah, and the porn industry itself is disassociative, right? You've got a generation of people who are growing up, like the rates of erectile dysfunction in men under 30 are as high as they've been since people started tracking that. That didn't used to be an issue for men under the age of 30, but they've actually wired their libidos to a screen. And so they're not actually capable of functioning like human beings because they're engaged in a fundamentally inhuman experience. And then when they try to translate what they're seeing online over into real life, they become inhuman as well. There's so many ways. I often think, and I was wondering if anybody can add to this, I would be very interested to hear people's insights. To some degree, a lot of the fluidity we have going on, a lot of the sort of comfort with transgenderism and mixing and matching body parts, what as Mary Harrington referred to it as meat Lego ideology, is enabled by pornography, because for the first time in recorded history, we do have people who would have previously been ordinary straight people spending an enormous amount of time, sometimes dozens of hours a week, staring at the body parts of the same sex. And there's no like normal responses to seeing that anymore. Like I said once as almost a joke in a presentation to kind of highlight the gender divide created by digital porn. Like if my grandfather, great grandfather could imagine that 2 generations hence, young men would be spending a huge amount of their time looking at other men's naked bodies on a video screen, they would have been like, what? This would have made no sense to them whatsoever. They would have been certain that it was a very gay thing to do. They would have no idea how to translate that over. Like, okay, it would make sense if you were gay and you'd want to do that, but like, how does it make sense for a straight person to want to do it? But because like the internet and digital pornography in particular has completely scrambled our neural wiring and eliminated like our sort of natural impulses on that. Suzanne, what are your thoughts on the connections between the pornography industry and everything we're discussing?
Well, pornography and hip hop are, but we're talking about pornography. There's a strong intersex between aggression and sexual arousal. That's powerful. It's very, very difficult to go. So I think you said vanilla. It's very, very difficult to go back to that. And I think that what we're seeing, pornography is the driving force, and prostitution is dismantling the human relationship, dismantling the relationship that can be had between 2 people that's normal and does not need, video contact. If children are looking at all of this violence intersecting with sexual arousal, then from a little child, you cannot experience intimacy and arousal without seeing violence. We have a dismantled culture. Our Western world is dismantled if young people cannot come up healthy. I look at it as, the opportunistic capitalists that are driving this is literally dismantling our relationships as an institution, dismantling the woman as an institution. We see our universities are going through it, being dismantled in a variety of different ways. We see our corporate America dismantled. We see jobs leaving the United States or being evaporated by technology in some way, shape, or form. So what are we going to do when we have a life where we are human, we relate to each other, we're supposed to relate to each other, we're a world, we're a culture where you go to work and come home, and build a family and provide for your family, but then those provisions go away, or the opportunity goes away for you to use your mind and to use your hands and to have a relationship and to have a family. Then what are we? Where are we going? What's the plan? Why are we doing this? And pornography is powerful. I can't believe that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade little boys can just click a link, or 6th, 7th, and 8th grade boys are going up to their teachers telling them that they're fine MILFs, or whatever that term. I think you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Literally degrading their, their teachers. And all the girls, talk about wanting to dissociate from your female body. All the girls are blindsided by this. You're in the 7th and 8th grade, and the teachers have looked at aggressive pornography before they came into school, the males. the boys have looked at aggressive pornography, the girls are like sitting ducks, and they're sitting there being the recipient of stares, comments, and they see it themselves, and it's just way too much to process. So it's fully understandable for girls to say, I'm gonna check out. So we have to say to ourselves, why do we want to dismantle first the woman? Why do we want to dismantle the woman as an institution? I think of the woman as an institution or a company that a hedge fund has purchased and has discovered that that company is worth more dismantled than whole. And that's what's being, chopped up, and kind of auctioned off to different pieces. And it's not a woman's issue. Yes, we are affected for sure, but it's a humanity. Where are we going? What are our values? What is it that we want? And why are we not stopping this train moving forward? As soon as you see an image where a woman is gang raped, and then people think it's cool, people think it's okay. Even kids' parents are like, oh, that's normal. Oh, it's just, boys being boys. Well, it's pretty graphic. It's pretty significant. And it's destroying how we think about each other and how we relate to each other.
So everything we've talked about so far gets at one thing, which is the breakdown of all natural barriers. So if we're looking at the fourth industrial revolution, if I look at the collective research and writing that all of you have done, and then the trajectory even of this conversation so far, we have the breakdown of all normal sexual barriers and the rewiring of people's arousal patterns to things that we can all, regardless of our background, agree are hideous or horrifying. I have a daughter. Even before I had a daughter, I had a wife. I've got sisters. This stuff is horrifying. And anybody who doesn't think so needs to break their computer, because they're probably consuming the same stuff. We're talking about the breakdown of the family. We're talking about the breakdown of sexuality and sex, as you discovered. And then we're talking also, as you mentioned, Michelle, about not even just the breakdown of ancient cultures so much as their appropriation and their use as part of a propaganda campaign for an industrial revolution that nobody has signed on to. And so, Suzanne, your question on this is that why are we going in this direction? Because what the three of you have described so far is essentially a tremendously destructive force. And the things that have just been listed in the last half an hour are all things that are deeply precious to all of us. Our relationships with other humans, whether that be parents, siblings, grandparents, spouses, children, the natural order that we've grown up within that we used to take for granted. We didn't used to think that gender and sex were up for grabs. The sexual economy that we once thought was normative, a sexual economy that involved a generic social acceptance of the idea that hitting anybody was wrong, but hitting a woman was particularly pernicious just due to the physical strength disparity. So what is it about the elites that are being referred to, the people that, Jennifer, that you've done so much work exposing in First Things and the Federalist and elsewhere, that makes them believe the project we've just described is desirable? Because everything that's been described so far, I think dystopia is probably far too weak a word to describe this.
I think that, and boy, I have to take a deep breath when I say this, but I think that we are at war. I think that we are being dismantled as a culture. When I say as a culture, I mean all of us. We have different ethnicity and background and things like that, but we all live inside Western culture, and there are things that we take for granted. Like, I never thought that there would actually be laws on the books that allows women to be raped in prisons. Never saw it coming. Never thought that women in sports, that girls would be forced into locker rooms and with men, and then to also have to stand on a podium, fake a smile while he's standing there in first place, and sometimes first and second position. So I feel that when the woman is under attack, when womanhood is under attack, the woman is used as a form of communication in warfare amongst men. And so if something is happening to a group of women and you can't stop it, that's like being conquered in warfare. It's like that's the woman now is the spoil of war. And so that concerns me. And that's what made me, one of the things that made me start thinking and start worrying and start taking a closer look at everything. This is years ago now. I think 2016 was when I started looking at this. And I said, now, really? Now, men are okay with that? Other women are okay. Some women are okay with this. We can't stop this. How do we not see that men can't be in prison? Women, how do you not see that? How is it that women are raped on film and men all around the world just click? Everybody's looking at it. Our kids are looking at it, but it's also, men around the world who may not think too favorably of the Western man. And so here he is, he gets to vicariously enjoy filmed rape of perhaps his enemy. So I don't know.
That's just briefly, that's objectively true, and that some of the most popular, like the search terms for Ukrainian went up on Pornhub right after the invasion began.
Right.
The racial categories on Pornhub that have people cosplaying as white masters and black slaves are blood curdling. Like a good chunk of the stuff legally should be considered hate speech.
Pornography is racialized. So you exoticize a Latina woman, you do things to the black woman, you do things to the Ukrainian woman, and so forth. But our culture, we have some economic things that are happening in the fourth industrial revolution, like nations coming together to try and create their own currency, a group currency, utilize their dollar instead of the American petrodollar. We have the BRICS nation, Brazil, Russia, India, China, now added South Africa, and a long list of nations are in line applying so that people can go against the American dollar. So you have all of these things where, there's a little blood in the water and it's a little soft power. We're not, we don't see it happening because the military tanks are not on our shores. But when you can go after the woman, you can look at the woman, enjoy the degradation of the woman from around the world, American women, all women. So when I say Western, meaning, North America, South America, Western Hemisphere, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, that's what I mean. And America. And we're cavalier about it. Oh, we're free, we're the first power, we're powerful, we're this, we're that. And we tend not to think that our sovereignty and our situation is permanent and that we're not vulnerable. But I think that we are vulnerable. As soon as a man can say, you know what, I feel like a 13-year-old girl and I've always wanted to be on the girls' swim team. So guess what? I'm 50 and I'm going on the girls' swim team and there's nothing you can do about it. So you have this situation where females are under attack, and that is the signal and symbol of warfare. Females are under attack, they're being taken as spoils, and nobody's doing anything about it, or they feel like they can't do anything about it, like the man's hands are tied. Sometimes, okay, so do you understand what I'm saying? It's like you can't see it, but it's there.
I wanted to affirm something that you're saying before I switch to Jennifer as well, because when you refer to it as a weapon of warfare, the reality of what you're highlighting is when you target the women, you get the males too. Because any man who allows his mother, his sisters, his wife, his daughters to be treated this way, or to allow somebody else's to, is fundamentally, voluntarily giving up his own masculinity. He's allowing for his emasculation. It's a form of castration to allow your daughter to get abused on OnlyFans, to allow people to talk about your mother that way or your sisters that way. I'm not necessarily advocating for old honor codes, but they're a lot better than what we had back in the day in terms of if somebody talked about your mother like that, you would be obligated to fight them, which is something that I still think whatever. And at least with regard to my own parents, I'm still on board with that.
Look at what Western culture has put in place. So much care for widows and orphans. Laws went on the books for widows and orphans. They care. Child support. legally enforced. You must take care of the child, and the woman has to be sustained to be able to take care of the child. We have protective laws, men and women prisons. We have laws on the books about domestic violence and rape and things like that. So, hey, there are women that want to see better and stronger laws. All of us, that's our debate, but at least we have them.
Mm-hmm.
But to see basic laws dismantled is shocking to me.
Yeah.
And I'll land.
Jennifer.
And rapidly.
Yes,
and
Jennifer.
rapidly.
Jennifer, you had leaned forward when we started this off.
Oh, I forgot what the question was. I was so entranced with what Suzanne was saying.
Well, there's so many threads here. One of the things I wanted commentary on as well is going off of what Suzanne said and what you said previously, is talking even about the way that the fourth industrial revolution is kind of breaking down all these natural boundaries. But then also when we're talking about things as a weapon of war, but we're talking about these breakdowns, I'm looking at sort of the breakdown of the natural family since the sexual revolution, which first started to break down what fundamentally were sort of natural human ecosystems by and large, with aberrations that everybody accepted as reality imposed them. But if you look to at what pornography and transgenderism have done, is you see the most popular forms of pornography in most countries. Western countries involve things like stepmom, etc. We're also seeing sort of the eroticization of collective trauma, that as these boundaries break down, we don't really know how to respond to this sort of collective breakdown and this consistent step-by-step disassociation, the breakdown of ancient cultures, the breakdown of gender and sex, the breakdown of what a healthy sexuality looks like. And so we end up having these profoundly broken, atomized individuals operating inside the machine. And the only thing they know how to do to actually accommodate and understand their own trauma is to eroticize it, to view pornography of it, and to participate in the ongoing degradation and breakdown.
Well, we're also talking about the breakdown of privacy. I mean, Edward Snowden is living in Russia because he talked about, he was a whistleblower, and he spoke about the surveillance of the state, and when sexual fetishes come out into the public and anything that's private comes out into the public, and we've been disclosing the most intimate parts of our lives online. And well, now it's online, but it used to be like on talk shows. Remember Oprah and Jerry Springer, right? Well, when you bring everything out into the open and there's no private and public, it's all there. People dissociate. This is like crazy land, and this is what's happening to us. But as I said earlier, dissociation is the name of the game. You just talked about the atomized human being. That's the name of the game. That's the drive. That's what they want. They want the cyborg. Now that sounds like a Black Mirror episode or Blade Runner, but we're already halfway there. We have become atomized because of pornography. 2 generations of it. That's 60 years of porn, of wiring ourselves also to the computer to have it. Yeah. So that hit is coming over the computer as well. It's coming over technology. We are being fused with technology. That's the impetus here. Yuval Harari talks about it. He's supposed to be one of our greatest intellectuals. Everybody hates him because he keeps talking about this, but he's not telling lies. I mean, he's telling what he sees, he's more or less in advocates for it. I don't. Elon Musk, his Neuralink just came onto the market, right? That's human AI interfacing. That's a direct connection to technology, to artificial intelligence put into your brain. Yeah. You have Mark Zuckerberg talking about a metaverse. Ray Kurzweil of Google. Is it Ray Kurzweil? Yeah, Ray Kurzweil of Google, which is a corporation that had the first transhumanist platform. And he's also the mentor to Martine Rothblatt, who I spoke about earlier, talks about a singularity, right? Where there's going to be, we are going to be atomized. We are going to be like cyborg-like. And eventually we will be uploaded into data, right? These are the things that they're talking about. Now, whether or not the earth will hold long enough for them to create the technologies that they want to create and that they're researching now and they're implementing now at an infant level, is questionable. But the fact remains that they're attempting to do this. They're attempting to hijack us, our humanity. Our humanity is on the line. Not just women, but women are first. Women have the lion's share of responsibility to create the species. And the men who want to be women want this power. They want to be women. They're not kidding. And they've been given power within the culture now to get that, to have that through technology, through technological reproduction. They can usurp our ability to create the species and think of themselves as gods thereby. Yeah. So they're not screwing around. I'll tell you that. They're not screwing around. But this is where it's all leading. It's dissociation is the name of the game. Meld people with technology. We're already halfway there. How much time do we spend on our computers? How much time? And what do we get for it? We get broken communities. We get broken land. We have no relationship to where our food comes from. We're completely reliant on this. If the grid goes down tomorrow, we are the only animals on the planet that cannot take care of ourselves. Because we're not really animals anymore, are we? Or are we?
Well, it's interesting, just for the viewers who are doubting anything that you said, trans activists are already demanding that the ability to transplant artificial wombs into trans-identifying people be completed and that the government pay for it when that's completed, just in case people think that. I wish you were utilizing hyperbole to scare people into listening, but unfortunately you're referring to a lot of things that are already underway. And one of the things you touched on, Michelle, I wanted to get your take on, because I do think it's important for people to understand the extent to which Indigenous cultures have been hijacked to serve this agenda. Here in Canada, for those who are wondering, we have a phrase that gets tossed around a lot. Our Prime Minister likes to use it. He refers to two-spirited people, which he claims is an ancient Indigenous word to refer to non-binary people or transgender people. They're not really picky about the way two-spirit is used. But when Quillette magazine did a deep dive into where this phrase came from, it's as ancient as the early 1990s, as it turns out. That's when the term began to be used for a very specific ideological purpose. It's an activist word, not an ancient phrase. And so how are they, I guess I just want to know, how are they getting away with this? Because they're not just doing it to the cultures in New Zealand and Australia, they're doing it in Canada, they're doing it in the United States. You have this really weird thing where the Western elites pay a lot of lip service to reverencing Indigenous cultures. And there's a lot of cosplaying at repentance for historical injustices committed. And at the same time, they're kind of inserting their pet projects, their pet ideological projects back in time, revising the history of these cultures in order to advocate something that you were saying earlier is not something that you're interested in, and it's not something that the people that you know are interested in.
Yeah, and it's a good question, because it's also, this idea that transgenderism is ancient and, has been for millennia. It does bamboozle most societies, because, Indigenous, like for New Zealand, for example, Māori are only, I think, 17% of the population in our own lands. That's not a lot. So we've up until recent years, we've kind of kept our culture, as far as I'm aware, just to us, if that makes sense. And by the way, Māori are not, and this is the same for all Indigenous that I'm aware of, we're not a homogenous group. We are from different tribes, and that means, a slightly different take on our worldview and the way that we do things. However, I'm speaking, broadly here. But the way I think that they've been able to, go with this narrative is that right now we have got more politicians in Parliament in New Zealand, Māori I'm talking about, than ever before. We've got far more academics, Māori who have become academics than ever before. So, and for the Western culture, they very much, And it makes sense. They very much take on board what the academics say. But that's not the case for Māori, at least, or for, like, there is no Indigenous culture that I know of that came from academia. And so for some reason, now, like, we have our elders, we have our rangatira, we have our leaders per hapu, per tribe. They're not necessarily academics. I mean, some could be, but, you know, academic, you know, being an academic has got nothing to do with being a leader of a tribe. So all of a sudden we have Māori academics, you know, speaking on behalf of all Māori, doesn't matter which tribe they're from. And of course, Western people go, oh, that's an academic, and that person must know everything about the culture. And it's just not true. That's not how it translates, you know. So
they're using Western understanding of knowledge to self-select the people who are most likely to agree with them because they've been educated in Western institutions.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, not all Māori agree with, you know, this current narrative about, you know, obviously, but it's more so the younger generations, Jonathan, that are coming up through academia who are being indoctrinated with this, you know, ridiculous idea. You know, Dr. Elizabeth Kerekere is probably the most well-known academic. When I say doctor, she's an artist. So she's been spreading, you know, the most unusual stories about our culture. I'd never even heard of her until you know, I saw her in an interview. So, and here she is speaking on behalf of all our tribes, you know, saying that, oh, before colonization, you know, Māori didn't have an issue with having sex. What does that mean? Having sex, you know, and what she was saying, what she was trying to say is that we were very liberal with having sex. Now, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you know, that it could have been different. It likely was different tribe per tribe. And, you know, I would say, just like, you know, other, like, you know, with the royal family at least, and other cultures, you know, pedophilia definitely played, you know, marrying young girls, definitely, that would have been a concern. But she made out in her thesis, of all places, in her thesis, that, you know, all Māori were all liberal with their sex, and, you know, chiefs were having sex with men, and without telling us, you know, giving us the actual evidence. And the reason why is because there is no evidence of that.
That's so interesting. One of the things all of you have touched on, and it was one of the subjects, Jennifer, that you explicitly brought up to make sure that we collectively discussed this, is when women go down, men go down with us, you wrote, which I kind of agree with. And I do think that the increasing breakdown of the family means that people aren't regularly exposed to things that were once natural, right? Like if you've never seen somebody have a child, if you've never been around a pregnant woman, you might not be aware of how, I always joke with my wife, like, as a male, the cool thing I can do is I can lift heavy stuff. She can actually like grow an entire she can grow an entire human being in her body, and like it's wild. It's wild what a woman can do versus what a man can do, which is why it's my job to lift heavy stuff for her and make sure nothing happens to her while she's doing this miracle thing. And this is something that if you've been around it a lot, you kind of recognize that women and men are not the same, and women are far more complex. And yes, as you said, creators of life and all that entails. And you wrote, Jennifer, that men are already being defeated in this tech war against women. I think so. I think that women are being groomed to be victims and men are being groomed to be predators by the internet, and that transgenderism is connected to this, exhibited by their willingness to stand down to this agenda while all around them women are being dehumanized and erased. And this signals the collapse of society. We must all be such fun at parties. So let's take that thesis statement. And I'd like to hear everybody's take on it, because I do agree. I think, Suzanne, you put it really well, that for us to allow this to happen, to our daughters, to our wives, to our mothers, right? This alone is breaking some incredibly like deep-seated connections that used to exist, right? When men are dying on the battlefield, they don't scream for their fathers, they scream for their mothers. There is a connection there. It's the same thing. It's like, you know, there's the phrase "daddy's girl." I have one. She's 6. There's a connection there that just, it's very, very difficult to explain, but the overwhelming sense of protectiveness that informs just every interaction in a relationship that's healthy at the right age is just, it's something that once it's subverted, socially speaking, you know that something has gone horribly wrong. So from each of you, based on each of your individual research, and Jennifer, you wrote this, so perhaps I'll start with you. What would you say that people need to understand? Because that's really why we're having this conversation. I could interview each of you individually for 2 hours because there's so much here. But what we're trying to do kind of is have the first of hopefully more conversations where we're sounding the alarm to people. So what do people really need to know, first and foremost, if you had to sum it up? Perhaps at gunpoint.
Well, I like the fact that, that quote that you pulled out, when we go down, men go down with us, and I think that, Suzanne made a very, very poignant point that we're in a war zone. We really are. We're in a war for our humanity. And men are not just predators. Men are also standing down. So they're becoming very, submissive, and watching their children and their wives and their sisters and their cousins be dehumanized with this language, with the fact when their daughters are on sports teams and they're playing against men. I mean, even 20 years ago, dads wouldn't do that. My father would never have allowed for that. He just would not have allowed for that. My brothers would not have allowed for that. Like, you're kidding me. Men are just like standing down. They're like paralyzed, So
why are they standing down?
I think because they've been demoralized. I mean, the sexual humiliation of women is demoralizing for all of us. And children are being also brought into the porn industry. It is so demoralizing. It is so denigrating. I mean, how do you lift yourself up as a man and be responsible after you've ingested this kind of material? You've watched women being multiply penetrated, called horrible, disgusting names. You've watched children being invited into the, porn genre. How you're demoralized. You're just completely like, you're beaten.
Yeah.
So yeah, you do have your predators, but I think more men are like,
pornography's demoralized them. Yeah.
Demoralized and also traumatized. I think men are traumatized as well because sexual material at this level, we weren't built for this. We weren't built for this. We were built for bonding. We were built for intimacy. Mm-hmm. We weren't built for this hellscape. We're being traumatized. And people that are traumatized, what's the first thing they do? They lock up. They stand still, They freeze. If you're in a bank and somebody's shooting, the first thing you do is like, right? You freeze. You're traumatized, So I think that's pretty much what's happening. And I think that men have to do some work. They have to get off porn. They have to turn off the computers, They have to get with their children. They have to take their children and get into nature. They've got to start caring. Huh?
Yeah, touch grass. No, I agree with everything you said.
Yes, absolutely.
Because there are two sides to it. And when I speak to men, this is what I say. There's what you just articulated, which is that pornography is emasculating. It's demoralizing. I had never thought of the phrase traumatizing, but I've talked to kids who are 15 and have been addicted to porn since they were 5. So yeah, traumatizing is the right term. And so that makes sense to me. And then calling them to something greater, like you were not meant to be this person. Right. You were not meant to have relationships like this. And I find that there's two ways: is horrify men by describing the reality of their life, but then like give them the alternative, which is we were built to protect and defend people. You can be part of that. And that is an incredibly beautiful and inspiring thing. And those two things together are often very effective. I can't believe actually, based on all the conversations that I've had, that I've never thought of the phrase traumatize. But it's 100% true. It tracks with hundreds of conversations that I've had. Michelle,
I also can't. say how many times I've heard, like on social media. I happen to be on social media quite a lot because I market my work there, not market my work, but I, share my work there, so that people can understand what's going on, or at least my perspective. And, men get really angry at feminism, and they don't really understand what it is, but they think that feminism disrupted the family. Feminism never disrupted the family, like real feminism, like the left feminism from years and years ago. Mm-hmm. They wanted the vote. They wanted credit cards. They wanted protective spaces for women. They wanted to be out in society, doing some of the things that men do, like learning at like universities, participating in social life. But men, they want to blame somebody. They want to blame somebody for this rupture in the family. And they wind up blaming women, feminists, when it's not really feminists or women. It's technology, disruptive technologies. They're growing and growing and growing. I mean, we used to live in tribes, right? Mm-hmm. Tribes are great because women aren't isolated with little children in a little box all day long while their husband is out in some other world, social world, having wildly different contacts with adults. And while the woman is isolated with little children with no help. It's not supposed to happen like that. It takes a village, right? Villages raise children. When my parents were young, all the women were having their babies together and young. They were having, their cousins and sisters were having babies around them. So they would meet, they would talk together. They had a community of mm-hmm. women that were raising these children. And when they sent us out into the neighborhood, other women were hanging out the windows. I grew up in an Italian neighborhood in Queens. So, they were all hanging out the window and the old people were sitting on the steps. Yeah. So there was, if you did something 3 towns over, your mother would hear about it before you got home. We used to say our mothers had eyes in the back of their head. But this was still a village because technology hadn't given us the option of moving across an ocean or across a continent to live someplace else, not, with your community, right? Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. it's technologies that have separated us and are continuing to separate us. The more and more advanced that they become, and they're growing exponentially every year. I mean, it's a little alarming, if you know what's going on. I gotta tell you, it's really alarming.
Michelle.
So I wanted to start out by saying, woman birthed every single civilization that has ever existed. Okay, start from there. And then why are men not doing anything? Well, largely, it's because, I'm going to say something really unpopular, but it's because men believe other men, and we know this because we are constantly told by many men, but he says he's a woman. He feels like a woman. Why aren't you going to be kind and just let him be a woman? Without, they're not thoroughly thinking this through. And we also see this in court cases too, where men who have, raped women, she wanted it, she asked for it, and they believed, even regardless of what the woman says, So, and this is, the soil for that, though, Jonathan, I believe, and this is from a cultural, point of view as well, is that the soil's being tilled for that through religions too, where women aren't considered to be as important as men in the world, and that's just, for our culture, like I said before, it's the other way around because of, because we do give birth, we are the creators in our culture, in humanity. What was the question again? I'm so sorry.
We were talking about why are people standing by and allowing this collapse?
Yeah. So again, because, and it's not just men that believe other men, some mm-hmm. women too, they just, take it, if a man says, if a man says, oh, I feel like a woman, some women are like, oh, okay, without really thinking
how could you possibly know that?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's no way that, I certainly would have absolutely no idea how to feel like a man. That's just totally foreign to me. I would have no idea. And which man would I feel like? So I'm pretty sure not all men feel the same. And that's the other thing, women aren't all the same. So again, it's this drawing a circle around all of us as being the same. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, transgender, we're all the same, And this, I think, well, the way I see it anyway, is also it's intentional, because with the fourth industrial revolution, they are attempting to make humans a category, or I guess a subcategory of other, like we're talking about cyborgs, robots, so we can't have, because cyborgs and robots, they're not delineated by tribes or by sexualities or anything like that. So humans have to emulate their idea of robots and cyborgs, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that does make sense. Now, Suzanne.
Well, I think that when we talk about our dismantling, we have a good chunk of people that don't want it, and we have those that do, and I consider those two, at minimum, the warring factions. So we've split into two. We have this queer hegemony, or this critical hegemony, and we have traditional Western hegemony, Western Anglo hegemony, and there's a war there. And in this new economy, we're seeing entire new avenues of profit taking to be had, entire new industries being created. And then we have, the quote unquote old, regular, normal life that we want to see. I think we all want to see that. Was to stay human, right? But then we're standing by and we're allowing ourselves to be erased. Men too. There are robot and cyborg ethical organizations that are set up for the ethics and rights of cyborgs and robots. And there are folk out there who think, hey, let's get these robots to be autonomous thinkers. Now, why would you allow that? Why would you create an entity that can think on its own? Because if it's modeled after the human, it's going to think for survival. And so it's not going to let you shut it down. Now, why do that? When the man, the human is the one that is the creator, the inventor, the builder, the one that can be reasoned. We talk to each other, we reason, we fuss, we want more rights. Jennifer, I really love what you had to say about that little bit about, blaming women and feminism and all that. Well, we've gone through a lot in a short period of time. Hundreds of thousands of great jobs offshore. You can't cry about why we are the way that we are. And then there's nothing there, and then the tool that we can use to survive and sustain ourselves gets taken away and reabsorbed. And why would man want to erase himself by putting his mind into the machine and then giving that machine autonomous thinking and then rights on the books while our rights are being taken away? So we're in this cacophony of technology and we're not managing it. We're not thinking about the psychological fallout from it. So I look at technology as erasing the man and the impetus for erasing the woman, but in very different ways. And the more we come together, we can see the big picture and we can all hold on to our values, our core value. Everybody's talking about us like we're just a hot mess and everything needs to be dismantled and start over. No, we're not a hot mess. We have good values in place. Maybe some people don't think so, but we do. And we need to reclaim it. Men, I think, really need to, please, I understand, why they want to blame feminism. I get it, but you have to think about everything at the same time. Why are we selling? Why do we sell our real estate and our land to corporations? Why would you do that? And drive up prices in the housing market. Why would you do that? Why would you outsource jobs that used to make $25, $30, $40 an hour? Where a man could feel good, bring home the bacon, all that old-fashioned stuff. And if a woman needs to work, a woman can work too, and work at a job that requires education. It's intellectually stimulating. Why not? You can't. We have to take a look at that. You can't do one major thing and then wonder why. You wonder why something else is happening. Our socialization, our learning, our value system is all around us, being productive, being intelligent, enjoying learning different things, being connected, being together, loving, bonding, and attachment. We need that. And all of this being dismantled under a new hegemonic system that's trying to hold on and take over. I've never in my life seen so many flags raised up above the American flag in my life. It's very, you don't think about it. It's just automatic. Oh, there's the American flag. Okay. But now people burning it down and raising other flags. This is very shocking. And it's really not okay. And it's a signal. And we need to pay attention. We can't just act like, oh, we're the heavyweight champions. We're always going to be like this, blah, blah, blah. No, there's other forces that are working on the Western traditional culture.
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting because the digital world has introduced a very desperate generation of men to all kinds of different figures. And on the side that the least offended, like you, so you have somebody like Jordan Peterson, and I remember like, why are people so into him? A lot of his advice seems to be pretty common sense to me. And I realized that's because I had a great dad, which means that I got all that advice firsthand. And it seemed like instinct to me, but it wasn't. I was given something that a lot of young men weren't. And then on the other hand, you've got like the Andrew Tate types. And like the only way that you think Andrew Tate is anything special is if you haven't had like a really great role models. Like if you watch his workout videos or whatever, but if you listen to his lifestyle stuff, like I remember seeing the first couple of videos when people told me he was popular. I'm like, you're talking about a guy who walks around shirtless, and oils himself before he goes in front of the camera is a manly man. Like that's not the kind of manly man that I grew up around, right? They're the kinds of guys wearing coveralls and had greasy hands and know how to build houses, not somebody who's peacocking because he knows how to flex.
And gives detailed instruction on the behavior reinforcement pattern that creates Romeo pimping. And there is a behavioral reinforcement to it. How you treat a woman, you give attention.
My friend and I wrote an entire investigative expose on exactly how he did that based on leaked files we got from the war room.
Yeah, but it's street level prostitution. Yep. Street level pimping, the Romeo and the gorilla pimp. And I'm like, guys, how do you not see this? Well, I get it. There's a generation gap. There's a lot of men that don't know. I grew up in the 70s, and 80s, and how you can see how street pimps operate. And I can't believe they're saying it right out loud in front of this generation of men that don't even realize what they're saying right to them. It's unbelievable.
Well, and that these are the men telling them, I'll free you from slavery while enslaving them. Like it's, Andrew Tate made his money on gambling and internet porn and online pyramid scheme grifts. He's literally enslaving them into the machine while promising them that he is the tool for their freedom. It's bizarre. But anyways, we won't go into the manosphere as well, or we'll be here all night because I think we'll all get fairly exercised. And sometimes punching down is too easy. So I think that one of the questions that I wanted to end with, and I hope we have more conversations as we kind of get this going, but just to keep it a reasonable listening length for people tuning in for the first time, since I think it's fair to say that we've front loaded people with a lot of information for the time being. As I guess I want to start. I want to end by just getting everybody's sort of opinion on what's a way to move forward, right? Because on one hand, there's sort of this very grim specter of the machine that has been rising up all around us since the advent of the digital age in 1989, when Tim Berners-Lee invented the internet and all the things that created. We're talking about the porn industry and its ubiquity. We're talking about transhumanism and the way it's started in a lot of ways. We've talked about the extent to which dissociation has affected intersected everything from like indigenous cultures to, you know, sexed reality. And so we're having this conversation because all of us are doing work to try and combat this in some way or another. And all of our work intersects in some pretty significant ways. So none of us would be doing this if we thought it was a waste of time. We're doing it because we're hoping to make some kind of a difference. And we hope actually that just ordinary human beings actually have a shot against the machine. Otherwise, we wouldn't bother. We would just sort of hide out in our own little, you know, communes or compounds, depending on how paranoid we were, and live life that way. But we're not doing that. And so I guess starting with you, Jennifer, what are some practical things that people can do, and what are some reasons that we can still be optimistic, if you might be so bold?
Well, we're still human. That's really, you know, that's hopeful. Many of us are still human. And I think that people are just now really starting to get it, that, wow, we are really screwed. And this is very helpful.
This was the hope. This was the hopeful part, Jennifer.
But if you can face that, then you can devise creative ways to resist it. If you ignore it, if you just hang out in hope that it's going to get better, that somebody else is going to make it better, then, you know, it's just not going to change. You know, it's not going to change. This is not something that will be brought down with like a sledgehammer to the head, like one blow. Mm-hmm. You know, it's going to die by 1,000 different cuts, by people becoming aware of what's actually happening to us and then moving into action, because we're in hell. And when in hell, keep moving. We all have to mobilize. What we have on our side is that we are the 99%. We have to start acting like a class of people, like the billionaires do, the 1%. They know they're a class of people. They understand that, they organize around that, and they act like a class. We have to do the same thing. Class has really gotten a bad name through the, you know, escalation of identity politics and going off the rails with that. But class is a good thing. You know, we changed, you know, the way that Black people are treated in this culture through the civil rights movement. You know, that was a good thing. In a sense, that was identity politics, right? That was class politics. Feminism, same thing. We made life a lot better for women in this country. They, you know, they didn't have choices. My mother didn't have the choices that I had. My grandmother had no choices, you know, compared to what I have. You know, we have choices. This is a good thing. You know, we have good things going on, and we have to figure out a way to do, you know, to get out of this. You know, and we're only going to do that collectively, and we're going to have to do that with creativity. You know, you have to work towards your strengths. You know, like I write and I'm an artist. So, you know, I use my perceptive abilities to create a language that people can understand what's happening to us. If you're funny, make jokes, you know, slay this beast with humor. You know, there's a woman on Twitter who just cracks me up. I feel like I can't go on another minute. And she says, you know, she makes another tweet. It's just hilarious, you know, and it helps. It fortifies me, you know, and whatever your strengths are, if you're a parent, get your kid off the internet, first of all, away from porn, get them into nature, go into their schools and demand that gender ideology is taken out of it, organize with other parents, start a protest if you're good at organizing. There's you know, if you turn around and throw a stone, you'll wind up with it, you know, hitting an organization that is all about this driving this ideology. So go protest now. You know, it doesn't have to be an enormous protest, but you break the censor barrier when you go out into the street. Kelly J. Keane is doing that in the UK. You know, she just started talking to women in the public park, right? And she broke the censor barrier. So much so that when she went to Australia, I think it was Australia or New Zealand, and they wanted to kill her. I think it was New Zealand, actually.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, you know, so there's lots of things that we can do, but we have to organize, we have to come together, you know, and basically fighting for our own humanity is what's more important than that, you know, and our children's future. There's nothing more important than that. And when you do it together, it creates energy and love. Resistance is really a love story. People think it's terrible and it's horrible, and how can you face that? But unless you ameliorate the horror and turn it into action, then you really will suffer. People suffer under that condition by taking in too much information. Then that's how they become traumatized. But as an artist, I know what I take in, I have to manifest something out of that. I have to create something out of that. And political resistance, it's the same way. Whatever the horror that you're taking in has to be ameliorated.
And C.S. Lewis said, friendship begins in that moment when somebody says, "What, you too? I thought I was the only one."
Exactly.
Michelle.
So I would say creating community is really, really important. And, a lot of us are doing that by creating our own groups and what we're doing, this morning, or for me this morning, as well, meeting up with other people, internationally, within the same country, within, even with your own family. Again, as a tribal woman, it's really important that that those connections, for my daughter at least, to her culture, is realised. And we make sure, my sister and I, travel to New Zealand, she comes here, and we actually have a big family anyway, so it's pretty. I would actually say that all children should really understand their we call it whakapapa, but should understand their family tree, is what you would call it, where they come from, who their grandparents, their great grandparents, what they did, all that type of stuff. I think it's actually pivotal, because if you don't know where you come from, how on earth do you know where you're going to? And also, I just want to finish with this, and that is, if the West falls, so do Indigenous cultures in the West as well. So, this is a very, very important, important issue for us as Māori and as women. So, so that's from me, Jonathan.
I'm gonna make a few people listen to this particular clip, because I'm obsessed with talking about my grandparents to my kids. I lost my grandfather a couple of years ago before my son could remember him, and so I started telling them all kinds of stories about him. And then he started voluntarily bringing up these stories about him, and I felt like I just won the biggest victory, because now he's real to my son as well, even though they never met when he was old enough to remember him. So I thought that was beautiful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
No worries.
Suzanne.
Well, I think the idea of creating community, look at the four of us on this interview right now. We're from all over. And look how we've been brought together, talking about this, because we have that panic in our systems that something is afoot and great changes are here, and that they're not good changes, And I think that we have to keep doing that. It's going to be across political lines. It's going to be across culture. Who cares? Let's stay together. I have met more Republican women over the last from 2016 till now that I never thought ever, and love them, and and everybody else too. Everybody together, stick together, do your protest, and start calling out what's really going on. You're trying to make money off of us. You're trying to turn us into a commodity. You're turning us into an industry. We do not want our children for sale. We do not want to be dependent on medicine, lifetime patients. We don't want to be lifetime patients. We don't want this to happen to our children. You're going to have to come up with some other business ideas, because our children are not for sale. Our wombs are not for sale. Our bodies are not for sale. And everybody needs to say that, including men. And, and men need to have some permission to come on in. Please don't think that women want this. I hear that a lot, Jennifer. Oh, you women wanted this. You women asked for this. Mm-hmm. I hear it a lot. And I'm like, when? I don't remember that vote. I don't remember that discussion.
No, I don't.
Never. So that men need to understand we don't want this. Don't want to see the woman erased, and do not want to see the man erased. And I don't think, I'm saying it out loud. Men are erasing themselves too with these, or are being erased with these technologies. So we have to come together, man and woman, different ethnicities, crossing political lines, so that we can stay human.
Thank you all so much for taking so much time to talk about this.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. That was
Thank you,
amazing.
Thank you for joining us for this conversation. If you want to hear other conversations like it, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find our content wherever you get your podcasts, or you can head over to thebridgehead.ca where we post both written commentary and video. Thanks so much for joining us.